As Americans, it is our duty to continuously strive to build a better democracy. And right now, our resolve is being tested. 10 days ago, again, George Floyd was murdered, brutally pinned down by police officers, causing him to suffocate. George is not the first American who is black to be killed by a police officer. Far from it. And Pennsylvanians and Americans are joining together to demand long overdue change. Protesting has always and always will be an essential part of democracy. In fact, the protests that have been occurring throughout the nation over the last couple days have done their intended job. They've called our attention once again to the systematic injustice that has blocked our nation from living out our destiny as a land of freedom and equality for all. Earlier this week, I spent time in Philadelphia, talking with community leaders, clergy, local officials, business owners, and I was there to listen and take their ideas and struggles and their plans back to Harrisburg. I also talked with community leaders in Pittsburgh and in Harrisburg and other cities all around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Throughout this week, I urged de-escalation and preached the theme of unity in Pennsylvania. But I acknowledge that as a leader, I need to provide a reason for people to actually want to de-escalate. I need to show that I'm listening. All of us here in Harrisburg need to show that people are being heard. So today, I'm taking steps to address concerns about long-standing violence and oppression against Pennsylvanians of color. First, I'm directing the MPOETC, the state police, and all other training academies for law enforcement to review their training curricula. This will include a thorough review and revision of use of force training. We will also develop standardized testing and best practices for verbal de-escalation techniques, trauma-centered approaches, mental health first aid, and implicit bias training. This is based on recommendations from the 21st Century Report on Policing that was created under the guidance of President Barack Obama and co-chaired by Commissioner Ramsey, formerly Commissioner of Police in Philadelphia. This effort will commence immediately. Second, I'm going to help municipalities, all of us are going to help municipalities develop citizen police advisory boards. The Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency will develop a program that provides technical assistance to municipalities to create a citizens police advisory board to address police action that leads to injury or death. We will work with cities and towns to create organizations that provide transparency and independent accountability. Third, we need to do the same on the state level. I'm going to create a Pennsylvania State Law Enforcement Advisory Commission that will review incidents of misconduct within law enforcement agencies under my jurisdiction and make recommendations to me and the heads of those agencies on how we can improve public interactions and prevent misconduct, oppression, and violence targeted at Black and brown communities. Fourth, we'll be creating a Deputy Inspector General within the Office of Inspector General. The Deputy Inspector General will be charged with four things: deterring, second, detecting, third, preventing, and fourth, eradicating fraud, waste, misconduct, and abuse among law enforcement agencies under my jurisdiction. And I encourage local jurisdictions to establish similar protocols. I had a conversation yesterday with Charles Ramsey, again, Commissioner Ramsey, who chairs the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And as I said before, he was the co-chair of the Commission on 21st Century Policing. Our law enforcement agencies have implemented many of that commission's recommendations across Pennsylvania. But we're going to speed up the process so our law enforcement agencies have a better sense of community relations, and better record of community relations, and a better understanding of the people they serve. Fifth, we will task the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency to create a racial and ethnic disparities subcommittee under the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee. This subcommittee will be tasked with reviewing criminal justice data at all decision points to develop a comprehensive strategy for policy changes, educational programs, funding, and technical assistance programs at the state and local levels. On Tuesday, members of the Police Reform Working Group, which includes state and local elected officials, the Chief Defender of the Defender Association of Philadelphia, as well as several attorneys, put forward some thoughtful proposals calling for the reform of community police relationships at every level. This is a culmination of years of work by members of the General Assembly and the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, which they've previously put forth legislation in this space. I agree with them that we need to explore greater oversight of law enforcement to root out misconduct and abuse. I'm going to work with them to implement their recommendations and pass legislation to address these inequities. We've already had some success. As you recall, we've implemented a fair funding formula, provided more funding to our schools. Still, we have a long way to go before we can make all of our schools truly equal, a long way. We've made our criminal justice system fairer by passing clean slate into law, by strengthening support for county probation programs, by fixing inadequate sentencing guidelines, and by reforming the post-trial criminal justice system. We've addressed criminal justice reform on a bipartisan basis, and that's what we'll need to do to fix these long-standing inequities. I might point out also that we've reduced our prison population. As of today, from January of 2015 today, there are 6,700 fewer people incarcerated in Pennsylvania state correctional institutions. 80% of them, 80% of that reduction, 6,700 people, are non-white. As we go forward, we need to address the looming systemic failings that have created this situation. This is not about the police. This is about the broad system of inequities that has sustained racism in the United States and Pennsylvania for too many centuries. These fights are real, but they don't have an endpoint. We have to keep going to make sure our Commonwealth is more fair and more equal for everyone. That is something that every one of us, every single Pennsylvanian, all 13 million of us, share a vested self-interest in. Pennsylvania has some of the best law enforcement. Again, this is not about law enforcement agencies. We have some of the best law enforcement agencies in the nation, and it has been an honor for me as governor to work with them. To establish better uniformity across our law enforcement agencies, we will strive to have all police departments become accredited, a step that the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Associations indicated that they support. As we change our system, we must continue to work with community and police organizations across Pennsylvania so the changes we as a Commonwealth undertake are effective, successful, and long-lasting. Because if we're going to transform our justice system for the better or make it fairer, we all need to work together. So this is a call for reflection, improvement, and most of all, of learning. We must rise to the challenge because too many people have lost faith in our public safety institutions and in our institutions in general. We must redouble our efforts to earn the trust of everyone we serve. Thousands of peaceful protesters' voices have lifted this call to action for freedom and equality throughout Pennsylvania. We cannot let them be drowned out by a few bad actors, and we cannot lose further sight of the legitimate injustice that gave rise to the peaceful protests in the first place. We must continue to listen to the voices of Americans and Pennsylvanians who are black and brown and who have been shut out, kept down, and cast aside for too long. I urge protesters to continue to be peaceful and denounce those taking advantage of their legitimate anger with illegal acts and destruction. It's time for Pennsylvanians and for Americans to come together around eliminating racism and injustice wherever it exists. We cannot do that in chaos. I pray that common sense, peace, and unity will prevail into a new chapter in our nation's history, one where we finally eradicate the disgraceful racism and prejudice that has plagued America since its founding days. People who are black and brown should not have to lead this change alone. Leaders who are white need to call out the injustice and speak out alongside the communities that have been repressed in this country for centuries. We have the chance to make our nation and our Commonwealth the one our founders envisioned, one of justice and liberty for every American and every Pennsylvanian. Our founders believed we could do this, and I believe we can do it too. Thank you. Now, happy to take questions.
Governor
Yeah.
Wolf, thanks for giving us this time. Where do you think we've fallen short here in Pennsylvania, in particular in some of these areas? It seems there have been efforts in the past to make these type of changes that you're talking about.
Well, again, and if you look at the 21st century report on policing, it looks at broad areas. You can go from education to healthcare to housing to food security. This is an issue that extends throughout the way we live, and we can no longer afford to have two Pennsylvanias or two Americas. This is a call for all of us to pull together and say, we need to have equity, fairness, decency, humane treatment of each other. Again, as I keep saying, if you can take justice away from somebody, you can take it away from you. If you can take justice or if you can take an equal opportunity from somebody, you can take it from everybody. We're all vulnerable to that. Unfairness is pernicious, and it can extend like a cancer if we don't stop it. And we can't say that it's okay to do it over here, because if we do that, we basically conceded the point that it's okay to do it to me. And we can't, I'm not going to concede that. Yes?
So do you support improved access to police body cam footage? And if so, will you reverse Act 22, which limited access to that footage?
Yeah, I think that's among the things that I want to work with the Legislative Black Caucus and see exactly how we proceed with that. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, Mark.
Governor, to what extent would you support public access to police videos? I mean, you signed the law in 2017 that exempted it from the right to know law. Have you thought about the extent to which you would like to see the public be able to access that?
Yeah, I think we need to be more transparent, and I would like to revisit that. Yeah.
To the body cam point, and because a lot of these deal with police entities under your control, was there any thought to making some sort of requirement that state police wear body cams, because that's relatively limited at the moment?
Yeah. No, as I say, I agree that we need to revisit that. Yeah.
Governor Wolf, it's good to see you in person again, first off.
Thank you.
Secondly, I'd like to hear more about the first point. Are you calling for all law enforcement across the state to rehaul the way they train for de-escalation? I think that's like a big thing a lot of people are calling for, so I'd like to hear more about that.
Yes, I am. Now, again, constitutionally, municipalities have their own prerogatives and their own rights, so I recognize that part of what I have here is a bully pulpit. But I think what we've seen is a need for our officials to be as transparent as we can possibly be, and to be trained in a way that would actually make them better stewards of their communities. Yeah.
Governor Wolf, also, the POBC, when they were looking at things that they thought you could do within your executive authority, noticed that they thought you could have the Pennsylvania State Police collect more information on police misconduct, police brutality, and make that information public, sort of make a clearinghouse within PSP for more data. Is that something that you would support? I didn't hear that mentioned among your executive actions today.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is continue to work closely with the Legislative Black Caucus in terms of looking at things that we could do that I haven't announced today. So I will continue to work with them. Yeah.
Governor, have you spoken to police about these plans? And how concerned are you about the safety of officers going forward? Because we have seen a number of attacks on them, and by de-escalated situations, could there be a balance?
Yeah, I'm concerned about I think all of us have a vested interest in making sure that there is a level of trust between community and police officers. We're not going to get to that if we're asking our police officers to defend a system that discriminates, where an education system isn't doing the right thing. I mean, that's unfair. So I want to build trust, and what I'm trying to do is not focus on saying the problem here is the police. It's that we don't have trust, and that stems from a much broader contextual truth in American society that it's just not fair. Yeah, Charlie?
Governor Wolf, the second point today was about citizen police advisory boards at the municipality level. And I just wanted to be clear on that. Are you actually suggesting that every municipality with a police force create one of those boards?
Yes.
Because some of the police departments are obviously very small.
Yeah, and I recognize that some of them will push back on that. And I don't have the right to impose that, but I think that's something that communities really ought to do, because their citizens ought to have absolute faith and trust in the people who are serving them on the front lines.
Can you elaborate on exactly like what kind of teeth would those advisory commissions have? What would you see them doing on the local level?
I don't have the details of that needs to be worked out. Yeah.
Governor, has there been any pushback from the police unions? What have they told you in response to these recommendations?
I think there's a legitimate reason to be concerned, and I think the point here is that what I'm trying to do is figure out a way to build a level of trust between the people who protect and serve and the communities that they protect and serve, and that's I think going to require more transparency and more of the things that I'm talking about here. Yeah.
Will the state police, will the inspector general release data of use of force among state police? And because this is through executive action, once you leave, will he also leave? Will the inspector general?
So those are two questions. The answer to the second question is the inspector general's term is going to be up to that person. Typically serves at the pleasure of the governor. So whoever the governor is may or may not keep that person on. So may survive my term. And as to exactly what they make public and what they don't, I don't have that right now. Don't have that detail. Yeah.
On the state advisory commission, how is that different than entities and mechanisms that already exist to review improper conduct by state law enforcement officials? I mean, presumably there are some mechanisms that already exist. What does this do to go beyond that?
No, we don't have one right now. You mean like a citizen review panel?
What is the form of that commission going to look like?
We have to work out the details of that, but it's basically saying that there has to be accountability to an independent group outside of each of these enforcement agencies.
Right, so who is going to make that up?
We haven't decided. I'm just saying that we need to have that independent, accountable organization. Mark?
Governor, there is legislation pending, and it was written after Antoine Rose was killed in East Pittsburgh, that would narrow the definition of allowable deadly use of force. Is that legislation that you support?
I have to take a look at that. I'm not sure which piece you're talking about. Yes?
I know we already talked a little bit about police possible pushback, but the Pennsylvania State Troopers Association just released a statement. They're saying that what you're saying here today is basically implying that our Pennsylvania State Police are no better than the people charged with Mr. Floyd's death. They also say this was clear when he ignored his own order in March in Harrisburg this week during a pandemic with people holding signs that read Blue Lives Murder, rather. I'm sure you'd like to describe that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not comparing them at all. I think the Pennsylvania State Police are doing a fine job. And that sign, I was in the protest yesterday, and there were a lot of signs. I didn't have any control as to who was there or not. I certainly don't condone that. But yeah, this is not an effort to point a finger. It's an effort to, as I say, build trust. Yeah.
Governor Wolf, it sounds like from everything you've described, like, will anything be different when a state trooper reports to work tomorrow? Is there anything that you see as being immediate, or is this all long-term looks for studies for implementation that on a 6-month window, on a 1-year long window, further and further out?
Well, tomorrow's Friday. I'm not sure it'll be that fast, but it's not something that's going to be this we're going to do quickly. Some of what I'm talking about, I think, requires some legislation, but most of it I can do very quickly, and I will. Yeah, John.
Obviously, the Minneapolis case, led to the protest. But I wonder, we've had protests across Pennsylvania. We have run-ins with police, with the public. What, do you feel like there were incidents in Pennsylvania where the police apparently acted inappropriately, or are you in a position to say that?
No, again, what I'm trying to say is I think what happened in Minneapolis and what people were essentially protesting in Pennsylvania was this sense of two Pennsylvanias. And none of us, white or black, can afford to live where we think it's okay for someone to be denied the adequate resources when it comes to education or health care or housing or the things that we need to live full and good lives. So I think what we saw in the protests was that. That's what I saw. That's what I saw in Philadelphia, and that's what I saw yesterday in Harrisburg. And so this is about what we need to do to rededicate ourselves to trying to live up to the noble ideals this nation was founded on. And we continue to do that. I want to continue to do that. I think that's really important, that we're here to pass laws, we're here to do things to address specific issues, but we're also stewards of a grand democratic tradition. Here we have a chance to actually make our democracy better for everybody. Charlie.
Yeah, of the recommendations you've outlined today and the potential executive actions and so forth, I was just curious if there's any of them that you feel are likely to have the most effect in the short term.
Say that again.
Of these points that you outlined today, is there one or two that you believe will have the most effect in the short term?
No, I think they're all important. Yeah.
So these bills on police reform have been pending in the General Assembly for years and years. When Rose was shot, they were introduced and they lingered in committee for years. Why do you think that is? And do you think they'll now get the support of the GOP?
Well, I'm hoping. First of all, I think the unrest, civil unrest, may remind us that we still have a long way to go. And as I'm trying to say, this is not something that's a zero-sum game. This is not the black versus the white community. This is all of us, all Pennsylvanians, 13 million of us. We have a shared interest in making this system as fair and equitable as we possibly can. Again, if we feel that it's okay to discriminate against one group, then we leave open, we give license to someone else to discriminate against us. I don't want that. You shouldn't want that. I don't think there's any Pennsylvanian, white or black, who should want that. So this is a moment in time when I think we have a chance to bring Republicans and Democrats together and say, okay, we can disagree about all kinds of things, but we ought to have a system where that child should have an opportunity to go to a school that is every bit as good as the one that your kid goes to. That health care should not be denied to them when it's not denied to you. The things that make up your life should be available to the lives of everybody in this Commonwealth. That's what this is about. I don't think that should be a partisan thing. And the fact that it has been in the past, I think, is maybe our inability to understand just how important and how central this is to our democracy and how we live our lives every day. Yes?
Governor, have you seen any data or anecdotal evidence that communities of color have suffered more in the economic effects of the pandemic and the shutdowns? And if you have, is there any way that aid is being targeted to them, or is being some steps taken to help them specifically?
I think I can get you the data, but there is data showing the unemployment rate among African Americans is higher, that the incarceration rate is higher among African Americans. Before I put a moratorium on the death penalty was applied to African Americans more than whites. So I think there's a lot of data that our schools in African American communities tend to have fewer resources. So I'm not sure that I've seen anything to say that the African American community has not been disadvantaged.
I meant specifically directly tied to the pandemic and then the.
Oh,
shutdown.
I think I can get you some information, but we have collected information on the prevalence of the disease, and the African-American community is one of the vulnerable populations. Obviously, the elderly African-Americans have been vulnerable to COVID-19. So if that's what you mean, yeah, we have seen that.
Governor, to the extent that you're talking about directing training academies to review their use of force policy, do you have that legal authority to tell them, go and review this, make sure it's up to date?
I think that I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think I do in terms of local municipalities, but we do provide a lot of training for local municipalities, and I think to the extent we can say this is just a normal part of training for somebody who wants to go into police work, that will actually be taken up by local municipalities. Okay, thank you very much.